Welcome to Unmasked and Thriving, the podcast. My name is TD. I am your host. Today we're beginning a three-part series on HIV. The title of the first episode is It's Not Ignorance, Why People Still Get Infected with HIV. People still get infected with HIV, not in small numbers, not occasionally, but consistently and in high numbers. And what makes this uncomfortable is that we are living in an era of treatment. We are living in an era of campaigns. We are seeing an era of condom distribution, awareness programs, school talks, and global targets. So how is this still happening? How is it that the youth still get infected in large numbers? And why is it that even adults who have lived with HIV for some time still end up in institutions where they get infected, reinfected, and act in risky behaviors? Today, I want to confront a myth that HIV is spreading because people are ignorant. Because the truth is that people know. They know about condoms, they know about testing, they know about ARVs, they know about HIV itself. But knowing is not the same as being able to protect oneself. And that is at the heart of this crisis. There is a strange arrogance that sometimes exists in public health. It assumes that if you educate people enough, they will automatically behave correctly. But human beings don't behave based on knowledge alone. Human beings behave based on pressure, based on emotions, based on survival, on power dynamics, on trauma, on loneliness, and on what they are trying to escape. So yes, people may know about HIV. So yes, people understand the risky behaviors, but the question is, what is happening in their lives that makes knowledge powerless? Because knowledge has become powerless. Let's start with this one. HIV used to carry fear in the 90s, in the early 2000s. Not the kind of fear you talk about, the kind of fear you feel in your bones. Because HIV was visible. There were funerals, not on weekends, but every day of the week. There was what was called wasting. Remember wasting? There was stigma. Still there in some areas, and though in smaller scales today, there was also the slow disappearance of the person you loved. They see people on ARVs looking healthy today. They hear undetectable equals untransmittable. They see celebrities living openly with HIV. And all of that is progress, of course. But progress has a psychological cost. It has made people feel manageable. So the urgency is gone. The fear is gone. And once fear disappears, prevention becomes a suggestion, not a survival instinct. Here's what we avoid talking about: poverty. A major driver of HIV today is not ignorance, it is economics. Many young girls do not enter relationships purely because they are in love. They enter because they need support. Transport money, school needs, food needs, food at home, a phone, a fancy phone for that matter, an iPhone, a sense of dignity in a world that humiliates the poor. Sometimes it is simply survival disguised as romance. We see transitional sex, and not always prostitution, but transitional sex. And when survival enters the relationship, negotiation becomes difficult. Because the person with money has power. And when power is unequal, condoms become optional. That is the truth. No poster can compete with hunger. No slogan can compete with desperation. No slogan can outperform desperation. Let's go deeper. In many communities, older men continue to have access to younger girls, and not because they are more charming, because they have resources, these men, because they pay for things, they can offer a better life. But that relationship is rarely equal. A younger girl may not feel safe to say no. She may not feel safe to insist on condoms. She may fear being replaced. So HIV risk becomes part of the transaction. And society often blames the young girl for bad choices while ignoring the fact that her choices are constrained. Here's another driver that we do not confront hard enough is alcohol. Alcohol is not just a social drink. In many places, it is a coping mechanism for pain, unemployment, depression, and hopelessness. But alcohol changes behavior. It changes boundaries. It reduces caution. It makes people brave in ways that are not wise. And suddenly, condoms are forgotten. Consent is blurred. Sex becomes impulsive. Violence increases. And people wake up with regret. Not because they didn't know, but because they were not sober enough to care. If HIV prevention does not address alcohol culture, it is incomplete. Now, listen carefully. Some people are not careless. They are wounded. Trauma changes the way a person loves. Trauma changes the way a person chooses. And it changes the way a person protects themselves. A child who was abused often grows up hungry for validation. A person who has lived through violence may use sex, alcohol, or risky relationships as an escape. A teenager who was neglected may crave affection in dangerous places. So, HIV is not always about pleasure. Sometimes HIV is about brokenness. And brokenness cannot be cured through education alone. It requires healing. Many women do not get infected because they are reckless. They get infected because they are trapped sometimes where living means poverty, trapped in relationships where refusal is dangerous, trapped in environments where violence is normalized. In their situations, HIV prevention becomes almost theoretical because condoms require negotiations and negotiations require safety. So when we talk about HIV, we must talk about violence because violence is part of the infection story. There's another truth. Young people don't just want health. They want belonging. They want to be loved. They want to be chosen. They want to be part of something. And sometimes in youth culture, being careful is mocked. Being disciplined is laughed at. Having boundaries is seen as weakness, so risk becomes social currency. And HIV spreads in environments where recklessness is rewarded. This is why prevention cannot be only biomedical. It has to be cultural. So we must speak to identity. So why? Or what is today's drivers of infection? Not simply lack of knowledge, but poverty, power imbalance, alcohol, trauma, violence, social pressure, emotional hunger, and survival economics. In short, HIV is still spreading because society is still collapsing in certain places. And until we address those conditions, we will keep repeating the same campaigns with different logos. We must stop insulting communities by assuming they are uninformed. And we must stop designing prevention programs that only target behavior, because behavior is often a symptom. The real target must be the conditions: youth economic empowerment, safe spaces and mentorship, trauma-informed support, reduction of gender-based violence, alcohol harm reduction, community-level accountability. Because HIV is not merely a virus problem, it is a mirror. It reflects the condition of society. In closing, in the next episode, we will confront a harder question. Why do people who are already diagnosed, who have already started treatment, still end up dying of advanced HIV disease? Because the return of AIDS in the treatment era is not an accident. It is a warning. See you next time.
Thanks for joining us on Unmasked and Thriving. If this episode spoke to you, share it with someone carrying silent grief or sacred fire. Subscribe, review. Come back next week. Come walk with us in the abundance, authority, and victory of eternal life.